Alright, how's everybody doing today? Back again with another video for you guys and gals. And today, what I have for everyone is my versus/comparison video between the LG G6 and the Motorola Moto G6. Now, typically how my versus/comparison videos go is I like to compare some of the similarities between these devices and talk about some of the differences, and then at the end we talk about the price and I give you guys my final thoughts and a recommendation or two. So that being said, let's get into this video. Now, starting off, the first thing I want to talk about with you guys and gals is the overall build quality and design between both these G6s here. And pretty much we got a bunch of similarities in that aspect. Both of these devices, which will remain in cases for the duration of this video, are made out of glass on the front and back with a metal mid-frame. In particular, on the Moto G6, we have Gorilla Glass 3 on the front and the back. And on the LG G6, we have Gorilla Glass 3 on the front, we have Gorilla Glass 4 on the back panel, and then we have Gorilla Glass 5 over the camera lenses back panel. So the LG G6 is like a mix mash of glass, okay? And in terms of the design aspect ratios on both of these phones, again, we have some similarities and we have some differences. Now, up front, dead center here, as you can see on both of these devices, we have 5.7-inch IPS LCD displays. I'm just going to go over it briefly, and then we're going to cover it more in depth as we move on. So they both have 5.7-inch IPS LCD displays. The LG G6 is a quad HD display, and the Moto G6 is a 1080p display. Okay. Other than that, some more design differences is we have a front-facing fingerprint sensor. Both fingerprint sensors on both of these devices are capacitive. We have a front-facing fingerprint sensor on the Moto G6. Okay. And if y'all look closely here, we have a rear-mounted fingerprint sensor on the LG G6. Okay. And if I flip this around for you guys, let me just do this real quickly. Alright, you guys can also see we have a difference in design when it comes to the overall camera layout, even though we do have some similarities in that regard. But in terms of the cameras on these devices, the Moto G6 has again that dual mounted rear cameras, but in particular it has a 12 megapixel primary sensor right on this side and a 5 megapixel depth sensor right on this side, whereas the G6 has a 13 megapixel primary sensor on that side and a 13 megapixel wide angle sensor on this side. Okay, other than that, some would say that these dual rear mounted cameras add a little bit of character to the device, and I would have to agree. The Moto G6 kind of looks like, you know, the back of the device is yelling at you, oh! Whereas the LG G6 kind of looks like almost as if the back of the device is kind of winking at you. But so, you know, I like what they did there. It looks a little strange, but it adds a little bit of character. Okay? Other than that, talking about some more design cues here, both of these devices have 3.5mm headphone jacks and have USB Type-C. In terms of differences, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack on the bottom on the Moto G6. Alright, whereas we have it on the top on the LG G6. Okay? Turn that display back off real quick. We're not ready for that yet. But yeah, other than that, in terms of the build quality and design, these devices are very, very similar. And based on that aspect, you guys are probably saying, which one do you prefer? And pretty much when it comes to the overall build quality and design, I have to call it a tie on both of these devices. I really like the designs on both of these devices. The build quality on both of these devices are top notch. They feel very good in the hand with a nice balanced weight, not too light, not too heavy. All of the buttons are very tactile and clicky and give me a nice responsive feedback, so that's really, really nice. And the fingerprint sensors are really, really fast on both of these. So all I have to do is drop my finger on, and you see right there, it comes on. So in terms of the design and the fingerprint sensor performance, again, all I have to do is drop my finger on, and it comes on. So they're really, really fast. And based on the build quality and design, I'd have to call it a tie. Now let's keep it moving. Up next now, I just want to dive a little bit deeper into the displays on both of these devices. Let's start off with the Moto G6. So let's fire this up. Now in terms of the display on the Moto G6, up front dead center here, as I said, you have a 5.7 inch display. In particular, when we talk about the specs of the display, we have a 2160 by 1080p display with a screen density of 424 pixels per inch. That being said, putting the numbers aside and talking about this display in day-to-day usage, I have to say this is a really, really good display. When I take it outdoors or I'm doing things outdoors, I rarely ever feel the need to max out the display. I typically keep it at about 50% when I take it outdoors. When I'm indoors or I'm doing stuff around the house, I generally keep it around 10 to 25%, and it works perfectly. So in terms of the display, I have to say Motorola, you guys made a really good display on this device here. So kudos. Alright, now jumping over to the display on the LG G6. Alright, this is another very, very good display, and I gotta tell you guys, is in terms of the display specs, we have a 5.7 inch display again, but where it differs is we have a 2880 by 1440p quad HD display with a screen density of 564 pixels per inch. So you get a ton more pixels on the LG G6 than you do on the Moto G6. But putting the numbers aside, as I launched Google by accident, putting the numbers aside and talking about the display in terms of a daily performance standpoint, when it comes to the LG G6, I gotta tell you guys, in terms of the display, it is a really, really good display. Now, there are a few things that I've encountered with it, but overall, I have to say it's a really good display. But talking about those things that kind of, in terms of daily performance, when I take the G6 outdoors and I'm using it outdoors, I've found that I really have to max out the brightness anywhere from about 85% to max brightness, because I found that the display on the LG G6 is really kind of dim. That being said, when I'm using the G6 indoors and around the house, I typically have to keep it anywhere between 35% brightness and 50% brightness. So it's a little bit of a bummer there, but it is what it is. Putting that aside, it is again a really, really good display. Now, you guys are probably wondering, which display do you prefer? And in this regard, I have to say I want to call it a tie yet again. And really, a good display to me is a good display. It can be any resolution it wants to be. As long as it performs and it doesn't give me any issues, then I'm going to call it a good display. So manufacturers can give me a 720p display. They can give me a 1080p display. They can give me a 2K display. They can give me a 4K display. As long as it's a good display, I'm going to be happy. If it's a crappy display, then I'm going to tell you it's a crappy display. We're just going to keep it 100. And in terms of the displays on both of these devices, they're top notch. So I'm going to call it, at least in the display department, it's going to be a tie. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper into the hardware and the software on both of these devices. Let's start off with the LG G6 this time. In terms of the hardware on the LG G6, as I said earlier in the video, on the rear we have dual 13 megapixel cameras, one primary sensor and one wide angle sensor. Both the cameras on the rear can record in 4K and give you 120 frames per second slow motion, as well as record in pro mode video and pro mode photo, which is really nice. So you can dial in your shot. Okay. Other hardware aspects is that the LG G6 does incorporate wireless charging as well as fast charging on this device here, so that's a really nice touch. No need to fight with cables. Good stuff. More hardware. This device has 4 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of onboard storage with micro SD card expansion. But the downside on the LG G6 with the micro SD card expansion is you cannot make your micro SD card internal storage or adaptable storage. So you're just stuck using it as portable storage. Now when you go into the settings, it's going to combine it all together, but when you try to actually save stuff to it, it's not going to work. And if you dive deeper into the storage settings, you're just going to see the option to make it portable storage. So that's a downside there. Other than that, the LG G6 has a 3300 milliamp hour battery in it. And then up front here, as I've already said, it has a 5.7 inch quad HD display and a 5 megapixel camera. And it has a one bottom firing speaker on the front there. Okay, and in terms of the chipset, the LG G6 is running a Snapdragon 821 quad-core processor and an Adreno 530 GPU. So we got a flagship chip in the G6 here, in the LG G6. Got to make sure I include that differentiation because both of these guys are called G6. So we got a flagship chip in the LG G6. Okay, that pretty much does it for the hardware on the LG G6. Now let's talk about the hardware on the Moto G6. Now in terms of hardware on the Moto G6, again on the rear we have dual rear firing cameras. We have one 5 megapixel sensor and one 5 megapixel depth sensor and one 12 megapixel primary sensor. And those cameras max out at 1080p 60 fps, but they can do slow motion video recording at 720p 120 frames per second. Okay, other than that, this guy has a 3000 milliamp hour battery built into it. Really good stuff. It also has a USB Type-C port which incorporates turbocharging. Really good stuff. And then moving to the front of the device, up top we have our 8 megapixel front firing sensor, which maxes out at video recording at 1080p 30 frames a second, but you can also do 720p 120 frames slow motion video recording with your front facing camera as well on your Moto G6. So that's really good. Then moving on across the top, we got our front facing speaker, which also doubles as our receiver for phone calls. We have our light and proximity sensors, and we have our display sensor, and then we have an LED flash across the top on the Moto G6. So we got a lot packed into this guy. Then, as I said, we moving down, we have that 5.7 inch 1080p display. Really good stuff there. And then across the bottom, we have our capacitive fingerprint sensor and a microphone. Okay? Moving deeper into the internals, this guy is packing 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of onboard storage with micro SD card expansion. And the one-up that the Moto G6 has over the LG G6 is that you can make that micro SD card internal adaptable storage. So that's a really good plus there, and I felt that I really had to point it out. Other than that, the chipset on the Moto G6 is the Qualcomm Snapdragon 450 octa-core processor and the Adreno 506 GPU. So we pretty much have a mid-range processor on the Moto G6. Okay? So really good stuff there, and that pretty much covers it in terms of the overall hardware on both devices. Now let's get into some of the software aspects on both devices, and let's start off with the Moto G6. Now, one of the things that I like about Moto devices, myself in particular, is that Motorola really doesn't give you a whole bunch. They just throw in a few useful features that they think their customers are going to enjoy. So in particular, let me pick this up here. If I lock the device and I move it, or I wave my hand across the display, you can see we have the Moto display, and pretty much when I get a notification or the device senses movement, it will light up and I can interact with my notifications, I can respond to text messages, so on and so forth. Other unique features that I really like about the Moto devices is that they have these really good quick gestures. So I can do a quick chop chop to launch the flashlight. So real quick, just like that. Another quick chop turns it off. And let's say, for instance, I wanted to get into the cameras. I just have to really twist the phone, and it launches the cameras really quick. So I could take a photo, I could snap a video, what have you. Or I wanted to do a selfie. Just another real quick twist takes me to the front-facing camera. So that really is a really nice touch. And again, when we talk about features, we have a really responsive fingerprint sensor, but we also have the ability to turn off the on-screen keys and use the fingerprint sensor to navigate through the device. And we could also shrink the display, so on and so forth. So we got a bunch of useful features on the Moto G6, as well as having the facial recognition. So let me hold it this way so you guys can see, and it scans my face and it unlocks, and it's really quick. Bam. Other than that, when it comes to the Moto G6, it's pretty much a stock Android affair. In particular, we're running Android 8.0 on this guy, so if I pull it up, you can see it's stock. If I pull down the notification shade, you can see it's all stock. Now if we dive into the settings and I go down to system and I go right in here, you can see we are running Android 8.0, so it's really good stuff there. So let me tap here so you guys can see the software, and let me zoom in a little bit for you guys. So you can see it right there. We're running Android 8.0 Oreo, and we're on the March 1st security patch. So it's not the latest and greatest, but it's pretty close. So that's really good to see. And again, that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy Moto devices as a whole, or on the whole, however you want to say it. So that pretty much does it for the software experience on the Moto G6. And pretty much, guys, in terms of day-to-day performance, I have to say it's really good, and I really only noticed a few issues. One, with a bunch of apps open in the background, I did tend to see a lot of slowdown, but that's pretty much standard for Android devices. And two, when I was playing games and I played them for longer periods of time, like longer than 20-30 minutes, I did notice a little bit of slowdown in the games and a little bit of hiccup, and the device did tend to get a little warm. But other than that, I had no issues with the device in terms of daily performance, and I had no issues with the software. Okay, so that pretty much covers the software on the Moto G6. Now, jumping over to the software on the LG G6, we got a bunch of stuff in this guy. Now, taking it to the lock screen, we got the double tap to sleep, but we also have the double tap to wake, and we also have your knock code, so you can knock patterns to unlock the device. So if you want to just be discreet and clever like that, you can do that, and it's a really nice touch. And you guys can see, if I double tap, okay, we also have facial recognition on the LG G6, and it actually is extremely fast. Now, it's a little bit buried in the settings on the LG G6 because it's under your smart lock settings, but it is really good. Other things in terms of the software, you pretty much have LG's complete suite here. So if I dive into the settings You can see out of the box, as you guys saw, it doesn't come with an app drawer. But if you jump into your home screen settings here, you guys gotta forgive me, I'm trying to do this with my left hand, not to go with my left hand. You do see, let me zoom in on that, and let me slide the camera over. Bam. You guys do see right there, you have the ability to turn on the app drawer, so you have a more traditional Android approach. Okay, oops. Taking screenshots when I don't want to. Talking about some more software features on the LG G6, we do have a built-in theming engine on this guy. And it does come with a few really nice stock themes, or you can download themes from the LG theme store. Okay? Other than that, you also have the ability to configure your always on display, make it brighter, add custom text, so on and so forth. We got a smart cleaning feature in this guy, and you do have the ability to customize your buttons and rearrange your buttons to your heart's content. Now, I've pretty much gotten used to using the LG G6 with no app drawer. That's why I pretty much leave it like that. But you do have a bunch of customization features on your LG G6. So you guys see I have it customized to where there's a quick notification pull down right here. So all I have to do is tap and it pulls the notification tray down. So no need to stretch, no need to reach up top to do that. It's really nice. I would even say it's nicer than the swipe anywhere to pull down on the notification shade on the Moto G6. So you guys can see if I swipe anywhere on the G6, it's going to pull down the notification shade. But I kind of like having the button as opposed to actually having to swipe. Maybe I'm lazy, but maybe it's just me. But that's really, really nice. And also, I've added these quick screenshot button. And in particular, with the screenshots, LG has incorporated scrollable screenshots, so that's really, really nice. Now, the downside to that is the scrollable screenshot doesn't work inside every app, but it does work inside a few. So that's really, really nice to see. Other than that, that pretty much goes over the software on the LG G6. And I gotta tell you guys, with the 4 gigs of RAM and the 32 gigs of onboard storage, talking about the performance in a day-to-day standpoint, when we talk about the performance on the LG G6, I have to say that it's really, really good, and I really haven't had any issues whatsoever. So in terms of the daily performance, when we talk about the software, it's really, really good, and it's really, really smooth, and dare I say, it's smoother than the software performance on the Moto G6. So I gotta give it a win in terms of the software. It's got to go to the LG G6. Alright, hold on guys. I think I see a phone call coming in. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I got a bunch of phones. Had to take a quick phone call. But anyways, jumping back in. So we covered the hardware. We covered the software. And that being said, who do I feel did better in each regard? Well, in terms of the hardware, I'm going to have to call it a tie. In terms of the software, I'm going to have to give the win to the LG G6. It just is what it is. Now, moving on, the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is the overall Wi-Fi in these devices. And now, in particular, this is where the Wi-Fi is a tie across the board on these devices. Each device has 802.11 BGNN and AC Wi-Fi. So what does that mean? They both have access to your 2.4 gigahertz band and your 5 gigahertz band Wi-Fi. So if y'all have routers that take advantage of that, you should be good to go. But real quickly, I just want to give you guys a real quick Wi-Fi performance test. So let me pull up the YouTubes. And let's pull it up over here as well. Now I don't want it to start playing right away, but it might. So let me pause that. Okay, it didn't start playing. And so let's pull it up over here. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and max out the speakers on both of these. So give me a second. Oops. Actually, I don't want to turn on my notifications. Hold on, guys. Let me max these speakers out. Alright. Okay. So I don't know how well you can see it, but we got max volume over here. Alright, and then let's go ahead and max the volume out over here. I think I could reach this one without taking it out the frame. There we go. So we got max volume over there as well. And one thing I want to point out before we start this Wi-Fi test is that in terms of speaker placement, we have a bottom firing speaker on the LG G6, and we have one single front firing speaker on the Moto G6. Okay, so just wanted to point that out. Now let's go ahead and start up this Wi-Fi performance test. I'm going to let the speakers play for a little bit. I'm going to scrub through the video so you can see how the Wi-Fi performs, and then we're going to keep it moving. So let's start with the Moto G6. Enjoy, guys. I'm going to stop talking now.
Stash is investing simplified.
And of course I get an ad right as I push play.
So you can build a portfolio.
Let that ad finish through.
Because we offer fractional shares, you can invest as little as $5 at a time.
Okay, I can skip that.
And use Auto Stash to make investments.
Okay, so that covers the Wi-Fi performance on the Moto G6. And real quickly, because I forgot to mention, you do have the Adobe surround sound built into this guy. So, and it really does make a difference. So you guys can see right there. Now I just left it on what it came on out of the box. I think it was set to music or something like that. But if you tinker around with it, you can hear the differences in sound, and you can also create your own custom profile. I'm not too good with that stuff, so I just stuck with the presets, or I turned it off. But yeah, that is in there, so you can actually tweak the sound to your liking. Just wanted to point that out because I forgot. But that covers the Wi-Fi performance on the Moto G6. Now let's move on to the LG G6. And one thing I want to point out, this video maxes out at 1080p 60, which is the maximum resolution for the Moto G6, but the LG G6 is actually a Quad HD panel, so if this was a 4K music sample, y'all would see that show up in the YouTube video resolution. So just because y'all don't see it in there doesn't mean it's not there. And also the LG G6 is an HDR compliant display. So if you're watching movies or shows on things like Netflix, you will have access to your HDR movie library, which makes it look really, really good. So I just wanted to point that out here. Now let's get started. scrub through the video. Alright, so real quick Wi-Fi performance test and real quick speaker test for you guys and gals. And again, as I said, in terms of the overall Wi-Fi performance, I'm going to have to call it a tie. They both perform extremely well. Now, in terms of the overall speaker performance, I have to give the slight edge to the LG G6. It just sounds louder in my opinion, and you know, a little bit clearer as opposed to the Moto G6. Now, in terms of speaker placement, I'm going to have to give the W to the Moto G6 because I really do like the front firing speakers. And you know, the bottom firing speaker on the LG G6 is really easy to muffle. So although LG put in a really nice speaker on the LG G6, they really have to rethink their placement. So it is what it is. Now, moving on now, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the bands supported in these devices. And pretty much, this is where we have another drastic difference. So let me just pull it up for you guys here. So, as you guys can see, I don't know how well it's going to zoom in on both, but we're going to try it. Okay? I might have to give y'all side-by-side screenshots that I'm going to have to edit in later. But in particular, the LG G6 comes in a bunch of different variants for all the different carriers. Okay? So, in particular, this model you guys see in this video is the T-Mobile model. It has been GSM unlocked, so I could take it to carriers like Boost Mobile, AT&T, Cricket, so on and so forth. But it's only going to work on GSM carriers or T-Mobile here in the States. Whereas the Moto G6 will work on every carrier in the States and every GSM carrier and every GSM carrier abroad. Okay? So that's a very big difference there. So in terms of overall LTE and GSM band support, I'm going to have to give the win to the Moto G6 because it's just very plug and play. With the LG G6, unless you get an international version, which might not work well here in the States, you're going to have to jump through a lot of hoops. Okay? You're going to have to make sure you check your carrier's band support, and then if it's locked, you're going to have to go through the trouble of getting it unlocked, which means buying an unlock code, putting the SIM in, going through all those steps. So it's a little bit of a headache when you get locked devices, whereas it's easier to deal with when you have overall unlocked devices. So in that regard, I'm going to have to give the win to the Moto G6. Okay? Now, moving on now. The next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the Bluetooth in these devices. Now, y'all just gonna have to take my word for it this time. But in terms of Bluetooth, both of these devices have Bluetooth 4.2 technology in them, and I'm very proud to report that in terms of the Bluetooth performance and the day-to-day performance, both of these devices work without issue. And I've tested them with just about everything. Speakers, headphones, other phones. It just works. So, yes, they don't have the latest and greatest Bluetooth 5.0 in them, but they still work just as good. So the Bluetooth on both of these devices is really good. Now, moving on, the next thing I want to talk about is something that I feel really strongly about, and a device really does have to have a good one of these in order for me to use it as a daily driver. And what I'm talking about, guys, is the overall GPS performance in these devices. Okay? And in terms of the GPS performance, I gotta tell you guys, it is really good on either of these devices. But let me just pull up my most recent test. and we're going to talk about it. So in terms of the GPS performance, I got to tell you guys, both of these devices locked on within a fraction of a second, if not a 1 to 2 seconds, and they got a fix extremely quickly, and doing anything that took advantage of the GPS module in the sky was a breeze. Whether it be turn-by-turn navigation, geotagging, Pokemon Go, I tried it, I uninstalled it. It is what it is. Sorry, bump the camera. But anything that takes advantage of the GPS in these devices worked without issue. And that's really important to me because I'm very, very dependent on my GPS, especially for turn-by-turn navigation. So having a good GPS that performs really well is really important to me. And if you, like myself, need a really good GPS, either of these devices will serve you well. Okay? So that pretty much does it for the GPS performance. Now we're going to go over the core thing in smartphones that needs to be there. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the call quality and the speaker call quality. Now in particular with the LG G6, I only tested it on T-Mobile and it worked really, really well. Receiver calls were really good. As long as I had coverage, everything was nice, clear, and loud. I did find that I wanted these speaker calls to be just a touch louder, okay? Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm getting old, but I feel like the speaker calls wasn't as loud as they could be, and they weren't as clear either. Now, jumping over to the Moto G6, I found again that receiver calls were nice, crisp, clear, and loud. Now in particular, I tested this on T-Mobile's network and I tested it on Straight Talk's network, which I found out was on Verizon's backbone. So it's backbone on Verizon's network, and I had no issues with calls, and calls were very loud, crisp, and clear with the built-in receiver. And I found that in speaker calls, they tended to be loud, crisp, and clear also. A tad louder than the LG G6. So in terms of call quality with the built-in receivers, I'm going to have to call it a tie. In terms of speaker call quality, I'm going to have to give the win to the Moto G6. Okay? Now let's keep it moving. Up next now, I just want to briefly talk about my experience with the cameras. Now, if you guys want a more in-depth look, including camera samples and so on and so forth, or you want the links to the camera samples, all that stuff is available in the full reviews of these devices. Links to those full reviews will be located down below in the video description. So if you want a more in-depth look at the cameras, please check out the links to the full reviews, which will be linked down below in the video description. But now, just talking about the cameras and my experience with them, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Let's talk about the front-facing cameras first. In terms of front-facing cameras, again, the LG G6 has a 5 megapixel front-facing camera, and the Moto G6 has an 8 megapixel front-facing camera. And putting all the resolutions and software trickery aside, going camera for camera, video for video, I'm going to have to say in terms of front-facing camera performance, I'm going to have to give the W to the Moto G6. The front-facing camera on the LG G6 is bad. I don't know what LG was thinking. They need to rethink that. Hopefully they've done better on their new device, the G7, but I'm going to have to wait till I get that device in for myself and play around with it and see. But in terms of the G6, the front-facing camera on the G6 is bad. Okay? Whereas the front-facing camera on the Moto G6 is really, really good. So, in terms of front-facing cameras, we're giving the W to the Moto G6. Okay? Moving on to the rear, again, we have dual 13 megapixel sensors on the LG G6, and we have a 12 megapixel and a 5 megapixel on the Moto G6. And talking about the cameras just in terms of performance, again, photo for photo and video for video, taking out all the software trickery and what have you, I have to say in terms of the rear facing cameras, I'm going to have to call it a tie. Now, pretty much with either of these devices, when I needed to take a photo, I could just whip them out and take it, and 9 times out of 10, it turned out good. And that's very important to me because I'm no photographer, you guys. I'm no mobile photographer. I'm just an average consumer with a love for technology. So I didn't want to have to mess with too many settings and tinker around with too much stuff. I just wanted to whip out my phone, launch the camera, and take the shot, which both of these devices do extremely well. So when we talk about the rear-facing camera performance on either of these devices, I'm going to have to call it a tie. Okay? Now, moving on to the gaming performance, and then this is where we're not even going to mince words. I'm going to have to give the gaming performance hands down to the LG G6. Things just run smooth. I didn't have any hiccups, stutters, or lags when I was playing games, whereas I did get that with the Moto G6, and the Moto G6 tended to get a little bit warm with its extended gameplay sessions. So I'm gonna have to give the win in terms of the gaming performance to the LG G6. It is what it is. Maybe it's the chip, maybe the software is not optimized, who knows. But moving on now, talking about the benchmarks, guys, you already know what it is. I'm not even gonna bore y'all with the stats. This is an old school flagship chip, and it beat the pants off of this mid-range chip hands down very easily. There was like at least 40 to 50,000 separating these two in Antutu, so that's a very, very big difference. So in terms of the benchmarks, you know the LG G6 is going to take the W. But at the end of the day, guys, benchmarks mean absolutely nothing. It's just raw performance data. And a lot of companies these days are implementing software trickery to boost the CPU and GPU so they get the absolute best benchmarks performance scores. Which is why I tend not to lean so heavily on benchmarks performance scores anymore, but they're still really nice to include. Now, if you want to see the actual performance stats, please feel free to check out links to my full review, which will be located down below in the video description on both of these devices. But the benchmarks pretty much performed where I was expecting them to. Now, moving on, the next thing I want to talk about is something that is very important to me again, and that is the battery life and the overall charge times on both of these devices. Now, in the interest of speed, because I'm trying to wrap this up, I'm just going to talk about my experiences. If you want a more in-depth look, including screenshots and battery stats, please again feel free to check out links to the full reviews on each of these devices, which will be located down below in the video description. But one thing I want to tell you guys before I jump in is that I am an extremely heavy user. Anything that I can do from my smartphone, I will do from my smartphone. So streaming music, streaming movies, Netflix, Pandora, Hulu, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything except for Snapchat, Google Plus. Don't really like Snapchat, guys. Don't hold it against me. But Google Plus, all that good stuff, everything just works, okay? And in that regard, in terms of the overall battery life, let's start there first. I'm going to have to give the win hands down to the Moto G6, okay? I found now, let me tell you, I was easily able to get through the day with either of these devices, but in terms of screen on time, with my style of usage, I got anywhere from 7 to 10 hours of screen on time using the Moto G6 like I would regularly use it, whereas when I needed to stretch it out, I was getting anywhere from about 7 to a little bit over 13 hours of screen on time. Now, that's a lot better than the LG G6. Now, in general, again, I was easily getting through the day with the LG G6, but I was getting anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of screen on time. So It got me through the day, but it wasn't the best. Now, it's good, but I've seen a lot better. So, in the terms of the overall battery life, I'm going to have to give the win to the Moto G6, and the LG G6 is holding that L. Now, in terms of overall charge times, this is where I'm going to have to call it a tie. Now, regardless of when or where I put these guys on the charger, when I did it at lower percentages, it took anywhere from an hour and a half to an hour and 50 minutes, okay? When I did it at higher percentages, then we were looking at about 45 to 55 minutes. So, you know, your results may vary, but these are just my particular results and my experiences. So in terms of the overall charge times, we're going to have to call it a tie. Alright? Now, I do have to give the LG device the slight advantage because it has the built-in wireless charging, but it doesn't have fast wireless charging. So, typically I use the wireless charging when I'm going to bed. So I slap it on the charger, which is on my nightstand, and I don't have to worry about fighting with cables or anything like that. And when I wake up in the morning, it's fully charged and ready to go. So I have to give it the one up there, but it's not enough to take the W. Okay? So that covers the battery life and the overall charge times. Now let's get into talking about the price. Now, full retail for both of these. I picked up the LG G6 from T-Mobile on payments, and I paid it off in about 6 months. Full retail, it was $500 at T-Mobile. Okay? Now, right now, today, you can find it anywhere from about $260 to $520. Okay? And in particular, I would recommend you go with the G6 Plus, because that guy bumps the storage all the way up to 128 gigs, and then you get the quad DAC and you get the wireless charging if you get the international variant of that phone. And I'll leave links to that down below in the video description. But I would recommend the LG G6 Plus specifically for those reasons. But when we're talking about picking it up full retail, it's going to run you anywhere from what did I say? 260? I meant 200 to 520. Okay? And now talking about the price on the Moto G6. Again, I picked this up from Amazon, as I said in the full review, and I picked this up on the Amazon payment program. So, full retail on this device from Amazon is $235. Now, if you buy it in other places like eBay or Best Buy, or I think it's available at Walmart, not sure, but if you buy it at other places, then you're looking at about anywhere from about $200 to $250. In particular, if you buy it at Best Buy, full retail without activating it on a carrier, or you know, adding a new line, which will save you $50 and bring it down to $200. But full retail without doing that, it's going to run you $250 plus tax. Okay? So that being said, that pretty much puts both of these devices inside of the same ballpark. Okay? If you want to get it used, or you want to get it on a carrier, okay, that puts them in the same ballpark. And I found that with my research, I was actually able to find these two devices at the exact same price, give or take a few cents. So on Amazon, I was able to find the G6 for about $200 or $520. On eBay, I was able to find the G6, the LG G6, for $200, $214, and $250 respectively. And that is with some 5-star sellers, so that's not just something I picked out at random. I actually did the research. Whereas with the Moto G6 on Amazon, I found it for $235. At Best Buy, I found it for $250. On eBay, I found it for $214 to $229. And the eBay variants are the international variants with dual SIMs. So that's a nice little positive there. Okay? But that being said, at full retail price, I would recommend you go with the cheapest one that you can get your hands on. Now, if you guys do your research and you're able to find both of these devices at the exact same price, then based on that, if you find them at the exact same price, I have to go with the LG G6. It just packs in a little bit more useful features. Okay, I'm not talking about gimmicks and camera features. I'm talking about useful features. Okay, the always on display, really, really good, as opposed to the Moto display, really, really good. The fast charging, good. The wireless charging really put this device over the top for me. So again, if you guys find it at the same price, go with the LG G6. If you're thinking about picking these up at the full retail price, then I would have to say go with the Moto G6. Anyway, that pretty much does it for this versus/comparison video. If you guys and gals enjoyed the video, please help your boy out and give it a thumbs up. That really does help me out. You don't know how much. If this video piqued anybody's interest and you guys are interested in picking up either of these devices at some really great prices, all links to pick up these devices will be down below in the video description, as well as links to the full reviews, which will have links to the cases, the camera samples, so on and so forth. So down below in the video description is going to be like a one-stop shop for you guys. So interest is piqued, hit up the video description and you should be good to go. And that being said, if you guys and gals know anyone out there looking for the best performing devices and products at the cheapest possible prices, please share with them my channel, because I'm doing this for everyone, because we all deserve the best. And also, I wanted to also let you guys know that this whole video was recorded using the 13 megapixel primary camera on the Moto E4 Plus with no external mics hooked up. So please let me know how the audio sounds, and please let me know how the video looked as a whole down below in the comments. Alright, I hope everyone has a great day, and I will catch you guys and gals in my next video. Peace, everybody. Wow, another long one.